Well, that's the best I can do. Andrew Eborn is with me for the first hour. He'll probably be able to do better. I'll give him some time to think about that. And let's get the conversation going. You can talk, you can tweet, and who better to talk than Andrew Eborn? A barrel of energy.
A barrel of energy, and a joy to join you.
Barrel's not offensive, is it? Just, well, I'm not sure these days.
Only very less. You can call me what you like, Nick. It's always a joy to join you.
Because I'm not saying anything like it, but we are talking a weight loss issue later, and I didn't want you to sort of link that with me suggesting you were a barrel.
Well, I can tell you,
I should stop talking.
Oh,
really, shouldn't I?
I should tell you, I'm half the man I used to be. But walking, apart from all these injections and things like that, with Govy and stuff, actually a healthy exercise is good. The thing I've got about these weight loss drugs is what happens when you come off them. It's like most things. You lose weight, it's amazing, you go down to the skinny, skeletal type character.
If you want to be skinny,
if you want to be exactly, if you want to do that, and this will help you. It's an appetite suppressant, is what it does. So as soon as you stop taking it, I presume your appetite comes back and
I don't know. Again. I mean, there's part of me that thinks obesity is such a big problem in this country. You know, if we have a pill, that's not a bad thing. But actually, how sustainable is it? And every time I take a pill, you know, and I'm afraid I'm getting to that age where I've got a little few. I'm not at the Dosset box stage yet, you know, where my daughters come round and just check that I'm not taking too many pills. But basically, I always think, you know, what's the downside of this? There must be a downside.
It's got to be. It's not good, I think. And it's always it's about in and out, isn't it? That's what you do from weight point of view. It's like a car.
Let's not be too graphic.
I think no, in terms of food, I'm talking about consumption.
Good, yes, but you also talked about out, which is very colourful.
I see.
And I didn't want to go there. But apparently, as we'll talk about later, that pill is, there's a thing called sleep apnea.
Yes.
I think that's what it's called. We'll hear more later from an expert. But 3 million people suffer from that. And I suspect what's happened is that side effects, if you like, of this have proved that there's some relationship that's quite healthy, which is really good because it's quite interesting. You know the story of Viagra, of course, right? And that was actually a byproduct, researching the effect that there was a drug for your heart condition that was used, and they noticed that there was a certain reaction to it that led to the production of Viagra. This is a bit early for this.
It's a little bit early. And the Romans, I can tell you, Nick, as well, the Romans used to have their own, which was a natural herb product.
Right.
And that was revealed in the Sunday Times, as always. Brilliant investigative journalism.
I'm just waiting for the messages to come in and say, what is this? Is this a 7 o'clock show at night? It's great to be here. It's Nick Dubois. Alongside me is Andrew Eborn. I'm sitting in for Dr. David Ball. Now, look, let's talk about some of the top stories. We've got to get serious now. Top Tory under investigation for alleged election betting.
Yes.
I mean, it beggars belief. I've written a novel. I wouldn't have put this in.
And you wouldn't believe it. I mean, fact is stranger than fiction at the moment. But yes, yet again on the headlines, there it is. Sunday Times, top Tory placed dozens of bets.
And who is this top Tory?
Well, they say he's the chief data officer. Chief data officer. And they say he's being investigated. So I won't splash his name all over the place because they've got to look into these things. Some of these are potential criminal offences and so on and so forth. The reality is that yet again, we're having more sleaze in the lead up to election. I always say that history repeats itself because we don't learn the lessons from history. And everything people do, everything they say will come out at some stage. So unless you're living a squeaky clean life, the optics on this are appalling. But what's interesting, Nick, and I quite like this, also on the front page of the Sunday Times, they say there's a wonderful Newman's View. There's a cartoon which says, I'd like to put 500 quid on me resigning over dodgy bets. So there we go. So that's what they've got there.
But actually, it speaks. The reason, I mean, I am almost beyond words. So just to remind people, and I do this just in the interest of transparency. I was many years ago. I was a Conservative MP.
Very good one.
Many. Yeah, it's kind of you to say so, and I'll pay you later, and you can put it on a bet. Many years ago, before that, I campaigned, and I would go out, and I remember knocking on doors during the fatal 1997 election, if you were a Tory, and the impact on candidates that these stories have, and volunteers. At least if you're a candidate, you've kind of got a stake in it that you might get elected. You go out, you're embarrassed, you're ashamed, you are like, you honestly at times you don't want to go out because people at the top of your party, whether it's Labour, Conservative or whoever, are just being so dumb as well as offensive. And I cannot begin to imagine the impact that has. So honestly, if someone does knock on your door, has anyone knocked on your door? You must tell me, actually. Have you heard from any politicians? It's a good thought, that, isn't it? 0344 499 1000. But just have a moment's sympathy for them, because the volunteers, there's nothing in it for them except their beliefs. And they have to come out when these people... Is it 4 now? 4 Tory?
At least. And I can tell you, there will be more. And what happens? I mean, firstly, I predicted it. No dodgy betting, insider dealing. I did say that when Sunak had some victory or some movement on his initial 5 pledges, and the easy one was always going to be about inflation. You know, when it was at 11%.
Do you think someone bet on that?
I think it could be. But when it was at 11% and he said we're going to halve it, that was the least ambitious pledge he could have made. And so the very day it came out, it was 2.3%. Just been announced, and I did say that when you get movement, that's what's going to happen. What's really interesting, and I think I'm the only person who's pointed this out in the media, is obviously the American elections are on November the 5th, which is Fireworks Day for us, and ours is on July the 4th, which is Fireworks Day for them. There you go, Fireworks Day for them. So we have fireworks all round. It's
fine. That was very politically scientific. Listen, the humour is in already. Good morning, Nick. What's all this early morning talk about Viagra? We need Mike with his Morning Glory for that.
Oh.
Very good. Mike Graham's show, of course, Morning Glory. Good morning, Nick, says Sean. There is only one party campaigning about real issues that affect the man on the street. Reform. The other main parties either don't answer at all, Labour, or drone on about the same old things that we're all fed up of hearing, as they are just empty words with no action. Then you have the others that are stark staring mad, says Sean in Gloucester. That's interesting. So he says Reform are actually talking about the issues that matter. Oh, a quick one on England. The England team have no commitment. It starts when they don't sing the anthem. Other countries belt it out. I don't think they care, says Mick. Actually, it's a good point, isn't it?
Yeah.
We don't get behind our national anthem.
Well, and it's strange. We mentioned previously about the taxi drivers. You know, we're not allowed even to display the flags. Well, it's extraordinary.
I want to talk about that story a little bit, because that really annoys me. That's Mayor Khan going off on one again. So we talked about the doom and gloom that is now sinking over the Conservative Party because they've got yet another betting scandal. I thought what Michael Gove said was quite interesting, and this is why. Rishi Sunak has said, I'm going to kick you out of the party, right? If these people are really, really bad, which they are, right? I mean, in a nutshell, that's what he said. He's going to be tough. Yet his own parliamentary private secretary, he's kind of said, all but I've done this, I've been really silly, or words to that effect. He's still in the party. So this reeks of one rule for them, one rule for us. Exactly what bedeviled the Johnson government.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right,
isn't it?
I always say, Nick, that trust comes in on foot and leaves on horseback. And the reality is trust in politicians, trust in the media, trust in the police are all at an all-time low.
So how do we deal with that? Because I've got lots of people, and the messages are flooding in, and do keep them coming. But basically, he's saying that same message.
You're true.
Trust it. But how do you deal with it?
Well, you have to respond. So what you have to do, and you have to respond very quickly. It's no good saying, I'm going to put them out straight away. As soon as you see this is what's going to happen. What you also have to have is transparency about what is the policy when things happen. It's the same with the BBC. When certain things are revealed, if you turn around and say, look, this is our policy when there's a complaint, here's the procedure that we follow, and as a result of that procedure, this is what happens. And as everybody understands that, because the problem is this, and I talk about the police and trust with them as well, if you don't know what the policy is, and I think sometimes that's the case with the police, they don't know what they're supposed to do and they're a bit confused and so on and so forth, so you have a mixed message. The way you restore trust is by having clarity and making sure that you follow the procedures which are agreed.
What issues are the political parties failing to address? You've only 11 more days of this election, that's the good news, but is there anything you're thinking they're not addressing that you want them to address? We'd love to hear from you on that. 0344 499 1000. Or you can tweet me at Nick Dubois or at Talk TV. Now, I think I've got this right. Have we got Paul in Leicester who's called in?
Morning, Paul.
I have this wrong. Good morning, Paul. Hello.
Yeah, hello. How are you doing? All right?
I'm doing very well, and so's Andrew. The airwaves are yours.
Right, I'm a traditional Conservative voter, which was, I say, centre-right, council estate work hard, small tax, you know, tough on crime, all that thing in the, managed immigration. And I think we've come through a generation of 27 years, 13 years of Labour. We've had big Brexit vote in between, which is both sides, and Conservative now. And I tell you what's happened in 27 years? Nothing. Absolutely nothing. The population's gone up 10 million. That's all good and well. But what have we done to have the people in? We've just been sold a thing a lot. It's not about being racist and stuff. What have we done? Since Blair came in, he lied. We're going to have a referendum on the 7-year break, I think. And he didn't want it because all the other countries in Europe decided they wanted a 7-year break.
You're talking about the temporary cap on immigration. Yes, he didn't go for it. Yeah.
He didn't. The other countries did in Europe. I think Holland did, and I think he didn't have it. And some things like that. And in his manifesto, ironically, stuff like that. And we've just been.
So, Paul, is the answer for you, going to be, I want to vote for a party that I think will return that trust and do things, or is it, I've a plague on all your houses, I've had enough with you, I'm not interested?
I think I'll still vote, but people all the way through them 27 years, you say all people, and they always say about politics, they don't do what the liars. People just say that as a normal thing, I think. But now, I think we're at a process where people are thinking, no, they are liars. They've not done anything. And it's going to be interesting what happens. And because Keir Starmer and I, something like when we're asking about immigration, it's just really blasé about it. It's not, it's probably about number 5 or 6 on his issues. It just isn't. Well, then he says, we're going to build all the houses. Hold on. Yeah, but we're not built. Most houses we built in this country, I think, was 250,000 1 year.
Yeah, at the moment, yeah.
Ago. Yeah, and he's talking about 1 million. But if you're not talking about the roots of the problem, not saying it's a problem, and people coming to live here, what's the point about talking about houses? But he seems to be happy to talk about the houses, but not about points about the immigration. Yeah. This is what's going on.
Paul, let's hear the wise words of Andrew.
Absolutely. Paul, good morning. It's lovely to have you on the line. I mean, you're absolutely right. And there's this thing about politicians. They always make these promises and then they're never really held to account after they've been elected. And that's a real issue, isn't it? What would you say would be the solution on immigration?
Is that myself?
Yes, Paul. Yes, absolutely.
Listen, you just want it. Well, in the 90s, weren't it? I think it was 80, 90,000. Well, people didn't have an issue, and it's not. As long as it was controlled. That's all you
the thing is,
fancy, didn't you?
Paul, the thing is, I'm going to take over from the Andrew Eborn show there for a minute, but I'm kidding. It's Sunday morning. Paul, the issue I would say is we have got the ability to control our own borders. And I think if the one thing about Brexit that I will defend until my dying days is there is no one else to blame for controlling your borders except your own government, whoever they may be.
Yeah, exactly. Oh, yeah.
And we have the power to do that, and yet we've got high immigration. Now, there's a big debate about that. Some people will tell you high immigration is needed to do the jobs because no one's doing them here. You've heard all the arguments before. But there's nowhere to hide now post-Brexit. We're in a new era, which is why I think it's always worth voting. Because these guys are the ones that make the decisions.
You just do that. If Tony Blair had done that, say, and we're going to manage it, you just pull a little bit, you got your mixing bowl, just a little bit each time, say, that's okay, that's better, instead of pulling it all in. But if you'd done that and been wise with people, it won't be a problem. Everyone will be relieved, and everything, the country now, but the semi will be all content. But he didn't, and if there's no infrastructure, he knew he weren't going to be there. Cameron came in, and he was going to make everybody right. I want everyone to be the same as me. Not a traditional conservative, a moderate one, almost centre-left one.
Paul, listen, Paul, for time reasons only, I think you ought to have a slot of your own on the show. You're covering all the subjects. A great call. Really good to hear from you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Paul.
Thanks,
and we'll
Paul.
come back to more of your calls, 0344 499 1000. Paul's talking about being let down there by the parties, but he's still got faith in the system. Like Sharon's just said to me, well, I'll definitely be voting reform no matter what, she says in the text. I've got loads more. I'm going to come to those. Keep your calls coming with me and Andrew Eborn doing the show this morning together. 0344 499 1000. A great Sunday morning. Good morning to you from us. Let's keep the conversation going here on Talk. And welcome back. You're with me, Nick Dubois, sitting in, of course, for Dr. David Bull, alongside me is Andrew Eborn. Well, he was alongside me. He's moved to the other camera station.
They told me to move to the left, and I did say politically. Is that what you meant?
Very
work
hard
on that basis.
Very hard. We're going through some of the top stories, but I've also flagged earlier about police stations being closed and highlighting 100 in London having been closed, and there's now a direct link being drawn with that in a report about basically people not reporting crime. And I asked you, has this happened to you where you live? And Ken from Kent has said police stations in Whitstable gone, plus in Faversham in Kent, of course. Canterbury police station is full of crooks. I don't know if he means the police there,
well,
or the crooks,
careful.
or the crooks.
Find a good defamation lawyer.
He means the crooks. Yes. I've got my lawyer with me. I reported a crime, theft, criminal damage, told by Kent Police, do you have a video of the crime? When I told a local councillor, she was daft. 3 later, 5... Oh, I see. You complained to a councillor and later 5 police officers turned up. That's not a very flattering picture he's painting of the police there.
It is difficult.
And I'm very happy for Kent Police to respond.
No, they should respond. And I've had personal experience of this when people are reporting crimes. One of the terrible things in London at the moment are people snatching phones while people are going away. It's been a big, massive amount of stuff. And somebody tried to snatch my phone just round by the BBC, so the cameras are absolutely everywhere. Wow. They didn't succeed because I gripped onto it very, very, very tightly. But I phoned up the police straight away and I said, look, this is the person, and we've got pictures. There are lots of witnesses, cameras everywhere. And they said, well, you're the X100th person or whatever it was.
And that's the issue.
And that's the problem. And they said, we can't do anything about it.
Doesn't that mean we've given up on crime?
And that's
the problem. It makes you feel we've given up on crime. Yeah, listen, we got Barry. He wants to talk immigration. Yes. Barry from Norwich. Hello, Barry. Good morning to you.
Good morning to you both. How are you on this lovely
Well, I'm trying to find reasons to be cheerful. Give me one.
Well, the sun's out as a reason.
That's good enough for me, Barry. It's beautiful today. So you'd like...
I'll make a comment on immigration.
Yes.
Right? Now, when I first got my job back in 1998, my basic hourly rate was $16.50 an hour days, $19.50 an hour nights, £21.20 an hour on Saturdays, and double time on a Sunday. Right?
Yep.
Now, I have watched my job and the rest of this.
Can you tell us what your job is, Barry? You don't have to, but it'd just be useful. What it was?
I work as a track maintenance engineer on the railway.
Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Hugely important.
Very important.
I've watched this country slowly deteriorate from 2004 when Blair decided to open up everywhere. And I've watched people's wages being slowly reduced. When I was working, and luckily still now in my job, I don't have to claim benefits because I've got a good job. But there are a lot of people now who are doing 1, 2, 3 jobs, 0-hour contract, claiming state benefits because of all this immigration, which is undercutting the British worker.
Barry, I'm going to tell you something that will probably annoy you here. But there was a very close advisor to Tony Blair, and it emerged about 7 years into the Blair government that they viewed immigration, right, as an incomes policy, a way of effectively stopping increases in wages, and that was part of the agenda.
That doesn't surprise me in the slightest. Yeah, and now we've got a Labour government probably coming in with some people say a absolute massive majority, and if they get that, that'll be no good for the country because there'll be no real opposition there, and they'll be able to do whatever they like when they like. And I don't trust Keir Starmer as far as I could throw him, man. Yeah, he's just. I just don't like the man, to be honest with you.
And is it because he's not putting the meat on the detail of his policy that, if you like, accentuates that lack of trust? Or do you is it just, I'm sorry, I don't trust Labour?
I don't trust him, right, since we had the referendum to leave the EU. Now, I voted to leave the EU, and I thought that was an absolute disgrace, right? The way the MPs in Parliament tried to overturn the democratic vote of this country. We live in a democracy. Now, whether you like it or you don't like the vote, you have to accept the vote. It's all part of living. And Keir Starmer was at the forefront
of absolutely,
overturn,
Barry,
overturn that referendum. And for me, that is truly unforgivable.
Why do you think, Barry, that Brexit has been barely mentioned in this election? Do you think they've all got different reasons for not talking about it?
Well, yeah, I mean, I just don't think they want to mention it. I think Keir Starmer thinks as long as he keeps quiet and doesn't say anything, he can stroll into down the street and get on with it. I mean, I personally think if I was Richie Sunak, I'd be throwing that at Keir Starmer every possible I could get about reversing the referendum.
You see, I would, because I think that's legitimate, don't you, Andrew?
Oh no, you're absolutely right, and I think as Barry rightly points out, you've got to turn around and say, look, this is the reality. The hard-working person on the street, this is hitting them. What we also have to look at, there are some positive things about immigration. So people always talk about net immigration, and one of the sound bites, if you like, in the thing is you're more likely, if you go to hospital, you're more likely to have the person treating you coming from a different country than actually taking your place. And that's the interesting thing. We need some sort of immigration in order to keep the whole society going, people in care homes and so on and so forth. A lot of those sort of immigration jobs work on that sort of basis. So there has to be a balance, doesn't there, Barry? What are your views on that?
Yeah, but what I also say is this. You've got, I don't know how many millions of people who are sitting around doing nothing. Right.
There is a high economic inactivity in this country.
Right?
Yeah.
These people can be trained to do these jobs. We don't need immigration all the time. It will take a bit of time. All right, you can't train a brain surgeon in 2 weeks, but you can train people to work in care homes and stuff like that. And my opinion is this: if you are on benefits and there's a genuine reason why you're on benefits, like you can't work because you're too ill, and and then fair enough, help people out. But the problem is nowadays the benefit system has become a lifestyle choice, and I think, if you get offered 2 or 3 jobs and you're capable of doing them 2 or 3 jobs, and you just don't want to do them because you just basically can't be bothered, then you say benefits taken off you.
Barry, you've actually introduced, sorry to interrupt you there, Barry, you've actually introduced the next subject we're going to be talking about. That was a brilliant call. Really nailed the issues there. Thanks very much for that, Barry. But it also means we've got to go to another break. Then we're going to come back because Keir Starmer has been saying handouts lack the dignity of wages. What's his take, therefore, on the benefits, the high cost of benefits, and getting people back to work? We'll be discussing that here. 0344 499 1000 is your chance to have that discussion and tell us what you want to be talking about in this election, not necessarily what the politicians want you to be talking about.
The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Good morning, everyone. And James says good morning to us. Morning. Just on people's wages, I started flying 25 years ago and the rate as an instructor was £50 an hour. Today, it's £60 an hour after 25 years. How are people expected to keep up with inflation when pay has stagnated for the last 2 decades, says James. Before we go to the topic I said we're going to discuss, let's see what Craig from Ilkley has got to say.
I think the biggest concern I have, and none of the parties are actually talking about this, is the one of partner profiteering. So, for example, where I live, the council tax that we pay, 87% of their budget is adult and child, social care. And how much of that 87% of our tax, or local council tax, is actually been given out to private companies who are effectively provisioning, very low cost care to people, vulnerable people in need, etc., and how much of it is actually being done in-house by the council.
That's I really want to talk about that now, but so we're going to talk about something else, because Craig's hit on a real point there. I think the only point I would add is, of course, that it's very expensive to have someone in care privately. I can tell you from experience.
Absolutely.
But in a way, that is subsidising, because the councils are paying very little money as well. Yeah. And so they're kind of letting the private sector pick up some of the slack. A brilliant call, Craig. Feel free to call in if you want to discuss that further, because you sound like someone who definitely knows that subject in and out. Now, let's get back to
it's the handouts. Handouts, lack of dignity of wages, says Stum, and he's right.
So what's he mean?
So basically what he's saying, rather than just giving lots of money to people, that he's making it a bit tougher, if you like, saying this is what we're going to try and do. What we want to do is make you incentivise them, proud in what yourself, and the way that you get self-respect is to go out and work. So if somebody can work, then that's what he's going to do. So that's it in a sort of nutshell.
But has he said, as I think our last caller was saying, Barry in Norwich,
Barry.
He was saying, is he also saying, if you don't accept a job, you're going to lose your benefits?
So that's the negative. So that's right. You can spin this story exactly. You can spin the story either way. You can turn around and say you're incentivized. It makes you feel self-respect and so on and so forth if you go out and work. But the other flip side of that, well, if you don't, we can take your benefits away. That's what we need to deal. And always with this, Nick, it's about drilling down the details, because there are people who legitimately need support. And those who legitimately need support must make sure that they get it. Those who don't, they should look down and clap on it.
Andrew, I'm going to bang the table. I'm not allowed to bang the table. Imagine I'm banging the table. Yes. Right? I'm doing this. The thing that's getting me is many people who are going into work, who want the dignity of work, are actually getting supported by working tax credits. In other words, take away the name, the state is subsidising wages. In the private sector particularly, but generally. So you've actually got someone going into work, they are now looking at what point do I lose my working tax credits or benefits, reducing their hours accordingly, and the employer knows this. They're as much to blame as anyone else. I mean, shouldn't we be aiming for where people are paid a fair amount by the employer for the job, and not our taxpayer money being redistributed?
You're absolutely right, Nick. We disagree on so rare things, and I think that you're absolutely right on this. The reality is that you mustn't be in a situation, well, I can't work this extra hour, otherwise I lose these benefits. You have to turn around and say, enjoy doing what you're doing if you can. I know there's some jobs that people live hand to mouth, and I get that. But the reality is, get pride in yourself, so it's not dependent on, if I earn a bit more, I lose this benefit.
But employers also need to realise that they can't play the system as well. And I've spent my life in business, so I'm not having a go at business here. I'm just saying there are big corporations that know the system and will pay people lower because they know it gets topped up by the state. And they're both people are complicit in this.
And I always say that sunlight is the best disinfectant. Right. So what they need to do is to turn around and look at the whole system. Say, look, this is what it is at the moment. These are the loopholes. If you understand how it works, we need to crack down on people playing the system.
And you're right about transparency. If someone wants to challenge that or explain it to me, I'd love to hear from you on that and any subject. 0344 499 1000 is the number. Nick, I just listened to Barry and he made a lot of sense. He really did.
He did.
I did roll my eyes when he first started saying about people on benefits, because I'm due to the effects of my radiotherapy and chemotherapy for stage 4 cancer. So we're not all doshing around. And I think he went on to make exactly that point. And I'm good luck with your treatment there. I've had a good friend who's been going through that. So I know how exhausting that is. I agree, you go on to say that there are some absolutely who screw the system, and it's wrong. I'm glad he put that caveat in, that there are genuine like myself, and that is always the case. Michael, thank you for your message, and as I say, good luck with that treatment. It is many things, but it's also exhausting. I know from a friend there. Right, now listen, very good. All these callers rolling in to talk to us. I'm delighted. Let's go to Bournemouth. Let's talk to Karen. Hello, Karen. Good morning.
Karen.
A lovely day. Reasons to be cheerful, Karen.
A dog, a wild animal in the background.
The wild animal always has to say hello.
Karen, what would you like to talk about?
Well, I'm really worried about the fact that they come out with major soundbites. Thank you for Tony Blair for that one.
Yeah.
But they never discuss the methodology of what they're going to do. They never discuss why they're going to do it. And most of all, they won't say what they won't do.
Wow.
Like in the case of Keir Starmer, I'm fairly sure that he will attempt to abolish the monarchy.
Do you think he will do that? That's interesting. What makes you think that?
Okay, well, they're in a very weak position at the moment with both Charles and Kate ill and Harry kicking off and doing his thing.
Yeah.
Bearing in mind the Westminster debacle, when Keir Starmer was asked, did he bully or did he ask Lindsay Hoyle to change things?
Oh, yes. This is when the allegation was he put a lot of pressure on the Speaker, which led to probably a real problem for Lindsay Hoyle.
Oh, it did. And also the best headline ever about Just Stop Hoyle was the one, yes.
Yeah, his answer was, quote, I categorically did not do that. Then the next question was, did any of your MPs?
Yes.
And boy, did he run away from that question.
Yeah.
So there's that. The King's also put himself in a slightly delicate position, because if there's a political battle going on in this country, which will develop, I suspect, then you have the situation of the King has going to be forced to take sides, because when he claimed to be defender of the faith, and if all this kicks off, like a lot of people are really worried it will.
Over faith, you mean?
Over faith, religion, is it sectarian politics and things? The King will have to take sides.
I don't think he will. No. I don't think he will, Karen. I think he said, and very interesting in his accession speech, I think it was the day after the Queen died.
It was, yes. Yeah.
He basically said, I know what my job demands of me. And he was saying to us in code, I've intervened as Prince of Wales. I am not going to do it as King. I really don't think he will, Karen.
Oh, well, I'm hoping on that one.
Good.
And the other thing is, I think once Keir Starmer's in power, the first thing he'll do is start upping royal taxes and emptying privy purses and things. And gradually weaken it that way. And I think that's what he means by his 10-year renewal.
Yeah.
Well, Karen, food for thought there, and thank you. Thank you so much for joining the conversation. Her point about detail is I think she was being pointed about Starmer, but to be honest, I think it applies to quite a few.
So many,
doesn't it?
It's all sound bites, isn't it? And you absolutely, the devil is in the detail. But I also look out for weasel words. So you turn them down and say we won't raise tax on working people. Well, what's a working person?
I know. According to the definition that came out, I'm not one because I've got some savings.
Yeah, exactly. So does that mean all the savings, inheritance tax, pensioners, all that sort of stuff?
It's just weasel words.
Weasel words. I hate weasel words.
And that's where Farage wins, isn't it? Because he just spits it out. Yeah. Sometimes rather inelegantly, and sometimes he's wrong, in my opinion, but he just spits it out.
And that's great. And even his turn around and say, we're not going to have a manifesto, we're going to make promises. So he knows about that sort of stuff.
He's actually a bit cheeky there, because his contract with reform, do you know the 2010 manifesto from the Conservatives was a contract with the people of Britain?
There you go.
Yeah, I know. So, but anyway,
but he knows the thing of the people. The other thing which people are not talking about, bizarrely, is the whole thing about COVID. It's not being mentioned once.
Do you know, that's fascinating.
Isn't that fascinating? What happened? Did we get it right? Well, we didn't. We were seeing all that sort of stuff. Look at countries around the world. So Sweden, for example, they didn't shut the schools, they didn't shut the restaurants, but nobody's
talking. Parts of America as well.
Nobody's talking
Florida,
about it. It was the biggest one. Potentially one of the biggest scandals which we need to shine a spotlight on. So why does it take the media?
Shall I tell you why?
Go on then.
Because Labour, Conservatives, Liberal Democrats, they were in the conspiracy of silence.
Yes.
They've agreed not to talk about this because they all got behind these lockdown.
Yeah.
Oh, let's not go there. Honestly, we haven't got time. We've got to go to a break. 0344 499 1000. I'm still here with Andrew Eborn until the top of the hour. Keep your calls coming in, your messages. What is it that you think the politicians should be talking about it? And are you satisfied with what you've heard so far? 0344 499 1000.
The home of common sense. This is Talk.
Welcome back on this fabulous morning. I'm here with Andrew Eborn. Look, I'm getting some very good messages in about working tax credits. I've got one from Sarah in West Sussex. I've got another one's disappeared from the screen. John, I think it's John McCallum. I'm going to try and read those out, obviously, later, but I'm also going to try and cover this subject because I think it really does deserve to be looked into in some depth. So I will come back to it, and I'll try and read those messages out later. Forgive me if I don't. But we had a voice message from Craig in Ilkley in Yorkshire, who was talking about social care, basically. And I'm very pleased to say I invited him to call. Here he is. So over to you, Craig. Welcome to the show. Thank you for your voice message.
Well, thank you very much for the call back as well. I do appreciate that. So good morning.
I was hoping you'd just shed a little more light on the point that you were making, and we'll have a little bit of a discussion about that, if we may.
Sure. I think it's a very wide term. I mean, the term I used and coined was partner profiteering, and it's across the whole of UK government.
What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean the provisioning of services through private companies, where the private companies are absolutely making a killing as a result of that. So, for example, there was a local issue here where the local council proposed putting in speed humps and 20-mile-an-hour zones, and I kept seeing the same name appear on the findings and the reports of this traffic officer. So I did some digging. He doesn't actually work for the council. He works for a company who's employed by another company who place him in the council. So there's two tiers of agency that are providing his services to the council. So that's two independent companies that are making margin off.
But is his job to outsource contracts?
No, he's the so-called in-house traffic planner, and it's a full-time job. It's not a contract. You're doing a job for 6 weeks. It's a full-time, recurring role that's happening every year. So that's one aspect. But we also have friends who's provisioning services for vulnerable and needy people within the Bradford region as well. And she tells us that much of what she has to provision for the care of people, let's say you need to stay at home and you need 24/7 care, to come in and do that is provisioned, again, via private company. But the private company are just employing people on minimum wage to come in and do that, dirty jobs and cleaning and wiping, etc. But they're paying top dollar for this. And that's why you see that 87% of the council tax that we pay here is going into adult and children's social care.
But wouldn't you have thought, Craig, sorry to interrupt you there, that actually it doesn't take rocket science, although you've done a good job looking into this. You would have thought a council would have worked this out and come up with an alternative method. What would be the logic to stop them doing that?
I can't understand the logic. I mean, you could think that, yes, it could be the ultimate beneficiaries of these companies could be donors, perhaps, of the political parties.
At a local level?
But at a local level, I can't work it out. I just don't know why they do it, why they don't go and employ people themselves to do these jobs. So that's a big concern.
So that's an issue around, if you like. Just bring Andrew in on this. That's kind of an issue around the principle. It is outsourcing one way or the other, isn't it? Rather than doing it yourself.
And you're absolutely right. And what we need to do, I always say, there are lots of questions that are not being asked and we're not receiving answers. So rather than speculating, we have to absolutely ask those questions. Why is this happening? And what are the consequences? And I think the electorate, we deserve it. The people deserve to have answers. And there's so many things.
Do the people care? Because Craig's found this out, but actually, how many people give that a second thought, do you think?
Well, because there's lots of things people don't ask questions about, and I think if they knew the answers or they knew this was an issue, then we should dig much deeper into those sort of things. And I always say we should question everything.
Yeah, and I think also we should have a scheme of control where any kind of government spending needs to be assessed.
Yes.
And if it's being spent within the private sector, there needs to be a limit of how much those companies are allowed to make. And
Craig,
if there's no research and development...
Can I just...
Go ahead.
There are controls in place now which are heavily bureaucratic. I totally accept that. But, and this is where I'm with you, what I think is striking, the easiest check in the world to make is when you see the same name, the same company, the same business winning contracts in all sorts of different places, but repeatedly in places. That's surely the best time. Yeah, hang on, absolutely. We should be looking into this, surely.
Yeah.
I'm just saying, Craig, there are controls, but I think they're obviously not that effective.
I don't think they're effective. And if you look, I mentioned about the traffic and planning people who are provision through 2 sets of agency. The top tier agency will probably have a master services agreement with the local council. So it's just one contract that has to be maintained. So it's one lot of legal services, one lot of compliance, one person to review that. So effectively the councils are a bit lazy. They don't want to go out to market. So they go out to a top tier provider, and then he farms it out and subcontracts it down even further.
And do you know what's really misleading about this, Craig? And I'm slightly going off subject, but I think it is of interest. It's also because I looked into it when I was in Parliament. The flaw with this is the statistics that then get produced say, look at all these small businesses that are getting government contracts. Well, they're not. They're getting them second-hand, subcontracted down, getting screwed on margin, whilst more often than not, that big player at the end is creaming it off. Craig, only for time reasons, I'm afraid, I've got to end the conversation, but thank you so much for joining us. And if anyone else has examples about, let's be crude, how outsourcing, some would say privatisation, is not always working to the advantage of the consumer. Do join that conversation. Great call from Craig there, 03444 999 1000. My main point to you is, what issues are the political parties failing to address? And tell me what you would like them to be talking about more, or would you just like them to be giving more information about their top line claims? 03444 999 1000. Andrew, just time for a story.
Yes, very last one we're going to do then. Starmer's growth plan doomed without access to EU markets.
Who says that?
This is what's happened. There's a top economist, economist. They're saying 56% of voters say Brexit is bad for the economy. What's really interesting is Boris got in by saying get Brexit done. This will be Starmer saying get Brexit undone, and that would be interesting.
You see, I'm slightly sceptical of the fact that he's going to try and unravel or rejoin the EU, but I do see their arguments for closer alignment with Europe. Alignment means signing up to lots of rules, and the minute you sign up to those rules, you take away control.
You're right. It always has to be a negotiation. The whole point about Brexit is to improve our position. You still need to do trade with everybody, and we need to look at those sort of things. That requires strong negotiation and making sure we preserve our integrity.
The attack on Starmer here is quite interesting, because they're saying, mate, you are saying you want growth. I'm sure they're not going, mate. All right, they're going.
They might go, mate.
But listen, everything you want to do depends on growth. Otherwise, you're going to be taxing us more or borrowing more than Liz Truss, right? And he goes, yeah, absolutely. The argument being put forward is you can't have growth without being in the customs union in that particular article. And with the customs union comes freedom of movement.
Of course.
Which, if you go full circle, might say why politicians are reluctant to talk about immigration again, because they may know where this could end up. Would you go back into the customs union? Because that's as close to the single market as you can get without actually being in the single market. So who knows? 03444 999 1000. But it is an interesting argument.
Fascinating.
Because for a man who said, we're economically going to be absolutely shattered by coming out of the EU. He's now saying, well, actually, it's more important what happened as a result of COVID and the war. And he's not saying all those things he said beforehand.
Watch out for those weasel words. The clues are there.
I wonder why. Mind you, the Tories, they're not talking about Brexit. They've kept very quiet about it. The Lib Dems, even they who want to rejoin the single market, they're not telling everyone because they're frightened of losing those Tory seats they're targeting in the south of England. It's quite interesting what's going on here. Andrew Eborn, fantastic to have you here.
Great
to
join today.
A star. Extremely delighted to have you here. Thanks for joining us this morning.
Is